Experience the transformative journey of faith with Path of Faith as we navigate the complexities of life and discover the profound truths that unite us all.
Esther's story is one of the best known in the Bible. It's hard to find someone who doesn't know who Esther was. After all, the story of a young orphaned Jewish who lived exiled in Persia and, surprisingly, became a woman of the world's most powerful emperor at the time, in fact, holds the attention of many people. And not just that. Esther was a fundamental piece within the plan of Livramento that God granted to his people. If you do not know, in Esther's days, the Jewish people were under strong threat, at risk of being completely destroyed. So how did all this happen? How did a young commoner of Jewish origin ascended to the post of Queen of Persia and became a protagonist of one of the most beloved stories in the Bible? What is the importance of Esther in the biblical account? Why is it not mentioned in any other historical source about the Persian period beyond the Bible? In this video, you will know Esther's true story and what we can learn from her. To understand Esther's story, first we need to understand the historical context in which it occurred. When Jerusalem was conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar II, many citizens of the Kingdom of Judah were exiled to other parts of the Neo-Babylonic Empire. Among these was an Esther's ancestor who had been taken as a prisoner to Babylon with Joachim, the time king of Judah. But sometime later, Babylon also fell before the offensive thorough fear that established the vast Achaemenid Empire. The Persians had emblematic leaders such as Cyril the Great, his grandson Darius I, and his great-grandson Xerxes I. King Ahasuerus ruled the Persians between 486 and 465 BC, and it was during this time that the young Esther would have lived. Ahasuerus is described by historians as a powerful and relentless king. At that time, Persian dominion extended from India to Ethiopia, and according to the biblical record, had about 127 provinces. Some scholars estimate that in those days, the empire had approximately 100 million inhabitants, and at least 3 million would be Jews. Esther's story took place in Susan, one of the three capitals of the Persian Empire, which served as an administrative and residential center. This city also served as the royal winter residence, where Ahasuerus had a luxurious palace. History begins by telling that King Ahasuerus brought together all his nobles, officers, military leaders, and princes of the provinces of Persia. And for 180 days, he showed the enormous richness of his kingdom and the splendor of the glory of his majesty. Then he promoted a large 7-day banquet for all Susan inhabitants. These banquets were an expression of power and wealth, projecting the greatness of the empire. Many scholars suggest that this event had to do with the meeting convened by Ahasuerus in its 3rd year of reign to discuss its military campaigns in Greece. In any case, the Bible reports that while the king Ahasuerus offered a banquet to his princes and officers, his wife, Queen Vashti, offered a banquet to women in the royal house. At one point, King Ahasuerus ordered Vashti, ordering her to enter her presence using the royal crown so that everyone could admire her beauty. The queen, however, refused to fulfill such order, because most likely this order implied in some dishonorable situation to her. With the refusal of Queen Vashti, she kicked her out of her post later, when the outrage of Ahasuerus had already passed, and perhaps he missed her. His counselors suggested that he summons the virgin, good-looking girls in his kingdom, Choose from them your new queen. One of these young virgins was a Jewish orphan girl named Hadassah, a name of Hebrew origin meaning myrta, a type of shrub. Hadassah was Abiel's daughter and was raised by his cousin Mardochai, a man from the tribe of Benjamin, son of Jair, grandson of Simon and great-grandson of Kiz. Hadassah was also known as Esther, probably her Persian name. We can say that she lived between two very distinct worlds, her Jewish creation and the pagan society of Susan, in which she had to live. It is possible that the name Esther is derived from the word Persian to star, but some scholars suggest that perhaps this name is linked to the name of the goddess Star, an ancient Babylonian deity. In the biblical text, Esther is described as a very beautiful and attractive woman, to the point of being told among the most beautiful young people in the whole kingdom, and chosen to present herself as one of the candidates before the king. Esther underwent a type of beauty treatment for 12 months. After this period, Esther was led by one of the eunuchs to the presence of Ahasuero. The young women were taken to the king and then no longer returned to him, except if the king liked any of them and called her by name. This is what happened to Esther. The Bible says that the king loved Esther more than all women, and she reached him in favor and benevolence more than all the virgins. The fact that Esther reached favor before the king meant that she had gotten the necessary liking to survive at court. Obviously, this was the result of divine providence. Thus, Esther was crowned queen instead of Vashti, and the Ashur king gave a great feast to all his nobles and officers. Vashti's deposition occurred in the 3rd year of the reign of the assembly king. Esther, on the other hand, was taken to the king Ashur in the 7th year of his reign. This suggests that approximately 4 years have passed between Vashti's deposition and Esther's choice as queen. During this time, divine providence was certainly in action to prepare Esther for its crucial role in the history of the Jewish people. Already next to Ahasuero, Esther helped dismantle a conspiracy discovered by her cousin Mardochai. She wanted for an end to the life of the king of Persia. However, unexpectedly, the biblical text changes the focus of history to promote a man named Amon, Agagita, who was an important minister of the Achaemenid Empire. Amon's description as the biblical writer records that a man was promoted by King Ahasuero to a position of great power and authority, above all the other princes of Persia. Then all the servants of the kingdom, gate of the palace, were ordered to bow and reverence Amon. And this included Queen Esther's cousin. However, Mardochai refused to bow or pay tribute to Amon. This refusal was perceived as a great disrespect and deeply injured Amon's pride. However, Amon's wrath against Mardochai has become not only personal, but ethnic hatred. He decided that it would not be enough to punish just Mardochai. Instead, he planned to destroy all Jews of the Persian Empire. Amon persuaded King Ahasuero to issue a decree to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in a single day, offering a great sum of money for the royal treasure as an incentive. The king, trusting in Amon, granted him the royal ring to seal the decree, which was sent to all provinces. Mardochai told Esther the terrible plan of Amon and asked him to intercede before the king. Queen Esther could not enter the presence of the king without being called, as this would mean putting her own life at risk. Then Mardochai pointed out to Esther that God, in his providence, could have orchestrated all the events of his life to put her exactly in the position where she was, so that she could act in favor of the Jews. It is worth mentioning that until then the king did not know that Esther was of Jewish origin, and therefore he was unaware that, persuaded by Amon, he had decreed the extermination of his own people of your queen. Faced with the delicate situation, Queen Esther urged all Jews to fast for 3 days, as she would risk and enter the king's presence. 3 days later, Esther did with her real costumes and entered the inner courtyard of the king's house. The suite, seated on his throne, saw Esther stopped in the courtyard and extended the golden scepter in his hand in favor of Esther, allowing her to approach. The king asked what she wanted and told her that she would give her even half of her kingdom. Esther, acting with a lot of wisdom, just invited Cairo and Amon to a feast she had prepared. Then at the time of the banquet, Esther asked the king permission to prepare a second feast the next day for him and Amon. Amon went to his house to boast about his friends and family for the prestige he had achieved in the empire. However, his hatred against Mardochai and the Jewish people were still stronger than ever, and their families they gave the idea of preparing a great gallows for Mardochai. Just that night, the king could not sleep and asked the kingdom records to be read to him. Reading included the story of how Mardochai had saved the king's life by denouncing the conspiracy that would end his life. It is really remarkable that this happened just when Amon was planning to ask the king permission to hang Queen Esther's cousin. The king asked about Mordecai's reward for that maid, and when he found out that he had not been rewarded, he asked Amon not to mention the name of Mordecai, to honor the man the king wanted to honor. Amon, thinking that the king referred to himself, suggested an elaborate celebration. But for his great humiliation, he was forced to honor Mardochai publicly. After the honor, Amon went home very boring. However, as soon as the Ahasuero officers were to pick him up for the second banquet promoted by Queen Esther, In the second feast, Esther revealed to the king that she was Jewish and that all her people were sentenced to death because of an Haman's plot. The king was very furious and left the banquet, going to the palace garden. Haman, knowing that the situation had been extremely complicated for him, decided to stay there to plead with his own life, Queen Esther. But when the king returned to the banquet's house, he found a man lying on Esther's couch. That was a violation of irreversible protocol, for the king understood that Haman had tried to rape the queen of Persia. Then the servants of the Alero court understood that this was the end of the line to Haman and covered his face. Sometimes it was a custom between the Greeks and Romans to cover the face of a sentenced to death. But among the Persians, this is the only reference of this custom. In any case, Haman was hanged on the very force he had prepared for Mardukil. As the king could not revenge the previous decree, Queen Esther was able to cause a new decree to be published, giving Jews the right to self-defense and to destroy, kill, and annihilate anyone who threatened them. As a result, the Jews killed their enemies and exterminated Haman's house. Even Queen Esther got the authorization from Ahasuero to extend for another day in Susan, perhaps in an indication that there was in that great hatred city against the Jews. In all, more than 75,000 enemies of the Jewish people were killed. Although the second decree allowed the Jews to plunder the goods of their enemies, they did not collect their spoils. Perhaps here this can be seen as a contrast with the episode in which the spoils of Amalekites were taken in Saul's time, a fact that led to the ruin of the first king of Israel. And it was precisely in the context of Esther's story that the Purim feast came to be celebrated among the Jews by the deliverance that experienced. The covenant people had survived an irrevocable decree of death. Over time, it is true that many critics have challenged Queen Esther's historicity, especially for her absence in other historical sources other than the Hebrew Bible. Many theologians even had difficulty accepting the canonicity of the book that records the story of Esther. However, some details about the life of the Persian court in Susan and the offensives of Xerxes against the Greeks seem to harmonize very well with the scenario proposed as the background of Esther's book. Therefore, the most conservative position on this book remains that Esther's story is not a fiction, but a historical record, and that Esther's absence in other sources may be explained, among other things, because that she was not the mother of the heir prince of Xerxes Averse. But this is a slightly more complex theme, with several arguments in favor and against the historicity of Esther. And if you are curious about this, write here in the comments so I can know. But most importantly, to understand that Esther's story certainly leads us to reflect on God's sovereignty, to fulfill his purposes, even when his hand seems invisible to us. No, Esther's book does not mention God directly. No great miracle is quoted in this book. However, divine providence was clearly present and directed every detail of the story, even through events that, in human eyes, seem to be ordinary or random. Sometimes we look at our own life and see nothing special, nothing extraordinary. Sometimes the silence about God's action in our personal history is challenging. But the truth is that God's providence continues to act, despite our distrust or perception capacity. In addition, Esther's story teaches us about the importance of trusting God, even though this puts our own lives at risk, and that we must pay attention to the fact that it is necessary to act wisely, always interceding God so that it directs our actions.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey at Path of Faith. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content like this.